Welcome to today's episode of the Post Sunday Podcast. This podcast is an extension of Genesis Church located in Orlando, Florida. Every Sunday, you can attend one of our three amazing services at 8:15, 9:30, and 11 a.m. Or if you don't live in Florida, you can stream live on Facebook and YouTube at Genesis Church Orlando. You can also watch on demand, and as always, follow us all week long on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X at Post Sunday Podcast. And also, make sure to subscribe to listen every week on Spotify and iTunes. Now, for today's episode, here are your hosts, Pastor Johnny Sierra and Pastor Tim Grandstaff.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Post Sunday Podcast. We are so excited to have you guys joining us here today. We hope you've had a blessed week. We are here. I am here accompanied by not only the legend himself, our pastor, our lead pastor, Pastor Tim Grandstaff, but his boss is in the building. Tim, can you introduce your boss, please?
I'm bracing myself for this podcast today on all angles. I've already been told walking into the office today, this will be the most shared podcast in the history of the Post Sunday Podcast because my wife is here today as the first female guest.
Let's go.
To be on the pod.
I'm just happy to join the bromance.
Tandy is in the building.
Yes. So where this goes, nobody knows. However, yes, this is my wife, my wonderful wife, who got to share with me on Mother's Day yesterday. And so we met a long time ago, almost 24 years ago, got married.
That's awesome.
In Lynchburg, Virginia, coming out of college. And so every story that I've told, everything that has happened in our life has been one big adventure. So it's great. We get to have her here today. You get to hear a little bit from her story, some of her stories, and some of them, I don't know what she's going to tell. So you're eating this up right now. I've seen it in your face all day.
So enjoying this, man. I got the popcorn ready. I'm just relaxed.
Don't pick the scabs. Don't.
And with that said, man, because I knew you two were coming on the pod together, I wanted to dedicate a song to you guys.
Ooh, Backstreet Boys, I hope.
For you guys. So I hope you can identify this. For those listening, it may be a little bit too old for you guys, but hey, you never know. Never know.
Oh, it's our first song. That's why Kaden wanted to know.
Oh, I see how you worked that.
Yeah, an amazing song.
Yes, tell us about this.
So this is, you may not be able to play this whole song.
They are taking a bit to ad-lib. I'm gonna just go a little forward.
So we were dating, and her dad was remodeling a house and had a nice big pool out back that he was having me rip all of the shrubbery away from. And so we were out there one night and turned the headlights on and wanted to just have a slow dance moment. And this was the only cassette single. So that tells you how old I am, first of all. Cassette single I had in my car, popped it in the tape deck, hit the headlights on, grabbed her by the hand. Ooh. We went out and stood in the headlights and slow danced out by the pool.
My man.
Quite
under
romantic.
the stars that night.
Listen, our lead pastor at Genesis
didn't know
Church
this.
is romantic. That's great.
As long as I can live at this level right now, because by the end of the pod, I don't know where I'll be.
I'm trying to help
you.
Y'all
are setting this up for
good.
Something big.
But I did do that.
Fantastic. For those that don't notice, it's called Say It by Voices of Theory.
There you go.
Let's go. You were rolling here, man. I was rolling Brian McKnight. So.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All of that. It was all
dude.
There.
That was my dude.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
And your shaved head and wife beater pictures. We got those. I'm pulling them one day when I'm back in that seat.
We all have something on one another. This
exactly.
is great. I love it, man. But that's my present to you guys here on the Post Sunday Pod.
Thank you.
And we're just excited. We're giddy. We're giddy today to have Tandy Grandstaff in the house. Tandy, how are you feeling today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
That's great. That's right.
There's a smirk in there.
That's so good, man. I'm going to love this. So, guys, thank you, man. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, if you guys been with us, we are on episode 19. This is 19 weeks of the way of the Messiah. all about Jesus. If you guys, some of you guys are tuned. I've heard people diving into season 1 just because they want to either get caught up or they want to just redo things. So listen, we're in season 2, episode 19. There's a season 1. Season 1's all about just a never-ending story. That's what we titled it last year. It's all from Genesis to Revelation, and we just had a fantastic time breaking down scripture there. But this season, again, it's all things Jesus. We're talking his miracles. We're talking his life. We're talking just everything that he'd been through, death, resurrection, everything. So with this episode, this kind of digs us into now some of the wonders of Jesus, some of the things that he did. And you guys were tremendous yesterday. For those that don't know, we have Genesis Church Orlando is in East Orlando, and we have services on Sunday, 8:15, 9:30, and 11. But yesterday we had the privilege of having Pastor Tim and Tandy on stage yesterday discussing not only celebrating Mother's Day, which, by the way, happy Mother's Day to all moms. Happy Mother's Day to you, Tandy. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. It was a nice day.
That's good, man. That's good. But we got to celebrate that. But along that, man, I love where you guys just linked that with the story that we're going to dive into and how that just really came together very, very nicely with where we're going. And so we're focusing our attention today in the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. I've been diving, actually, it's funny that we talked about this wedding ceremony because I've just been really diving into Jesus's miracles. And here we're going to find his first official public miracle, pretty much beginning and leading him into public ministry. And today is Christianity boring, right? Like, that's the driving force of what we're talking about a little bit today. And we're going to look at it through the lens of this wedding. So
Absolutely. So the story is great because it does have a mother and son moment. So as we've come to Mother's Day, and it just really lined up that way. I didn't realize when, it's playing out that all of a sudden this is great because it does have that relationship factor to it. And so, as you said, this is John giving us a glimpse into something, and we'll break that apart as we spend some time together. But it starts out this way. In verse 1, on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And so Tandy had done a great job yesterday, really just painting the picture of Mary and the prominence of and the status of really being someone that was helping run or handle the wedding and what it meant to run out of wine.
Yeah, I mean, for Mary, it was important for this to go well so that she could have a good standing, and anyone who helps any friends or anyone put an event on, you always want it to go well. You don't want to run out of the things that you need. For me, when I throw a party, I think about food and drinks. Those are my favorite things. So that's what makes me enjoy. That's what makes me feel relaxed. So that's the thing I focus on the most. So I'm sure running out of one of the most important drinks at the event would probably have been it would not have been a good situation.
No, not at all, especially wine. Back in this time, I'm telling you.
For a 7-day wedding, you got to have something to get you through it.
It's crazy. But, wine was a very important and symbolic drink that the Jewish people would partake in, and so it was very important, and they ran out of it, and I wonder why they ran out of it. I mean, right? Jesus here brings his entourage with him, and they're like, were they invited? I don't know, but when you invite Jesus, you're inviting his people as well. So,
and that's important. As we talked about yesterday, is that Jesus at this time, for lack of a better term, has this celebrity status. He's known. He's got teachings that people are hearing and listening to. Crowds are starting to follow him. And so this makes him, we would say automatically a big guest at the party in the sense of, because we now know it's Jesus and what it's all about. but just in that setting, in that context, the very fact that Jesus, this at the moment rabbi teacher that is starting to have this following, has arrived at the wedding, and he's brought some of his disciples with him. Like you said, he brings his closest followers wherever he goes.
Yeah.
They're observing, they're watching, they're experiencing everything he's about.
Partaking
This
with
is part of
everything they're
discipleship that
doing.
we've
Yeah,
been talking
yeah,
about.
yeah.
But he gets to the party, and now there's a problem, right? On the third day, it tells us, he arrives, and now they've run out of wine. And this has created, quite a conundrum in the moment for his mother. And so she turns to him and says, they have no wine. And then he responds to her and says, woman, what does this have to do with me? And so we talked about that yesterday, because when we read this naturally, woman, what does this have to do with me? We know if on this podcast right now, I was to be like, hey, woman, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well.
That verbiage would not go well right now.
I am not going home the right way.
Not at all.
That's not, but Tandy, really brought some context to what is happening in this moment for what Jesus is doing.
I think it's hard to know exactly what was going on in Mary's mind. Maybe in her franticness, she wasn't thinking about the fact that, he was going to perform a miracle, or I get my son sometimes, I need your help just to come and help. And I wondered when I was studying, did she know that in this moment that she was going to be helping start what was going to be the beginning of the end for him? And, I think maybe she probably had, there must have been some kind of hesitation when he said that to her, because as we spoke yesterday, woman was not a term that was ugly. It was a very endearing term. It's how a person would respond, how Jesus responded to the women that were close to him at that time. So it wasn't ugly. But I wonder after he said that if there would have been some hesitation in that moment, because she knew what was coming. She was the one who was called to deliver this child as a miracle. So I wonder in that moment if she had thought about, oh my gosh, in him doing this, I'm starting the beginning of the end. Who knows? I don't know, but I think about those.
Yes,
moments.
big time. And as you say that too, I've thought of that too, because it's like, it led me to Luke chapter 2, verse 19. It says, but Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart.
Yeah.
And for me, there could be another reason too, but for me, I fall into this one because I just felt like she knew there was something special about this guy. And I don't know if she thought, okay, maybe he could do a miracle at this point, but I know there's something you can do. And so that always made me think with this story, like, is she now like thinking like Tandy said, is this now going to begin something?
Well, and biblically, it was the first time that he ever responded to her not as mother or as, his mom. So she would have had to have at least recognized that. Whenever my kids called me Tandy growing up, I was like, excuse me? No, we do not call me Tandy. You call me mom.
Yeah,
I worked really hard for this title, and you will call me mom. Yeah. So I can only imagine, even though he was older, if Kobe called me Tandy today, I'd be like, what? What are you doing? Like, no. So I'm sure she knew something significant. At least she had to have recognized that he wasn't calling her by the normal thing that he would call her by.
I think go ahead.
Could she have because I read it, a little bit, but could she have assumed that he was just going to financially support this increase or bringing in more?
I think maybe
supply?
She was expecting him to run to the store. I'm like, Kobe, I'm out of this. Go to the store. I thought about that. Yeah. Was she really expecting him a miracle? No, I don't think so. Maybe. I just always go to the people who are closest to me. Hey, I need help with this. And you brought all these people here. Help me out.
But it's loaded because when you really sit in it, as we're doing in the moment, there's a lot of things happening. I know for Tandy in and of herself, she has cherished our children in the stages of life. And like many moms, as those stages change, it's difficult, right? Like, oh, I loved my little kid. I loved him at this age. I loved when I got to do this as a mom. Those things that inevitably happen in your life. And And so when those changes come and they get older and they want to be more independent and they want to move out on their own and those things, like, these need to happen and you need to let go. At the same time, every mom wants to pull their child in, right? And hold on to them, those cherished moments and memories, even though new ones are coming. Mary's no different. She's a real human being. This is her son. Yet at the same time, in this passage, not only is there this change in wording of a title from mother to woman, he uses the phrase, my hour has not yet come, which we know is symbolic all throughout Scripture for the end of what's going to come. The day, the hour, the time, God's judgment, his sacrifice through his son Jesus, all these things are culminated in this term all throughout the Scriptures. But as he says it, notice what his mom says. She turns to the servants and she says, do what he tells you. It's like she realizes something bigger is happening right now. She may not have thought that's the way it was going to go, right? In the request. She may have thought financially you're going to help go get some better wine, but the way that he responds to her allows her to see something is shifting right now. And that's what John is wanting us to see. It is so picturesque, like movie scene type scenario. This is why we always go back to The Chosen. They've done a whole episode on just this story alone, right? And it's amazing that they would have a whole episode about that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have, in this moment, you have Mary looking at the servants and saying, do exactly what he's about to tell you to do. So she fully understands and fully grasps that something greater is transpiring and taking place that hasn't happened before between her and her son relationally, and also in what he's about to do. And what he's about to do is also very loaded. And we didn't unpack all that today. We'll do that in a few moments as well. But as Tandy was, expressing yesterday, that heartache of, I'm your mother and you're my son, but at the same time, I'm about to become like everyone else. You're going to be my savior, right? Like, what's that transition feel like? We don't know, but it's taking place within the story.
Yeah, which is, it's really good, man. There's this level of faith too. Like that.
I mean, she's had to have faith her whole life, right?
Yes.
I mean, from the very beginning, we all have when we first carry this child and whatever, but I cannot imagine being responsible for the savior of the world, and I'm sure she was expecting to have a little bit of help from God on that one, but like, what an awesome responsibility. But then just like, how do so she was prepped, but I can still think that there would have been a little bit of fear in that moment. She didn't know the timeline that Jesus had, nobody really did. So she didn't know how this was going to play out. Yeah. I don't even know if she knew that he was going to be beaten as bad, like we don't know what she knew.
Seems like she's in the edge of her seat.
Yeah. She had to just trust that it was going to be okay.
Yeah. I don't know when this is happening, but like any mother, hey, go figure it out. I want it done. Yep. Like there's a level of faith that, moms have that say, hey, I know who you are. You can do this task. Go do it.
And this is what's beautiful about a Mother's Day story in this, what you wouldn't see.
The relationship, right?
Is the relationship. Because then he's honoring his mother at the same time knowing he's about to honor his Heavenly Father. So there's two relationship streams for him playing out. But as a mom who's a widow at this point, because Joseph's nowhere in the picture. So as all scholars believe, he has passed because he's no longer talked about. Jesus knows I need to honor my mom. Every mom wants their kid to honor them and their requests, right? I know for her, just as a mom, any mom, she likes it when our kids listen and do what we ask. And when they don't, or they're disrespectful or whatever, there's a struggle there. And so you see this real relationship happening between Jesus and his mother where she has a real need. My status in the sense of I'm already a widow, but I'm kind of helping run this party. And with no wine, that's gonna really come back at me. Son, I need your help. Are you willing to help me? And he's like, but the time has not come, but I guess it's beginning now type of a deal because I'm here to honor you. But I also know once this takes place, Like it's like the music in the movie, like doom, 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 doom. Like here goes. Like now it begins. The end is now in sight for everything that's happening here.
There's this integration between honoring your parents, fulfilling the commands that God has asked you to fulfill. It's all encompassing. There isn't a, hey, all right, take a break from me, God, and go help your mom. Like, no, like there is blessing within it all.
Yeah.
Right? And so I go into questions like, what if Jesus didn't help her there? Because he says the hour has not come yet. Like, when would have been the hour? I'm sure he had it mapped out. But it's showing us that there is blessing in obedience to honoring those that have helped you, instructed you, that have guided you, that have put roofs over your head, your parents. There's blessing behind that. It correlates to everything we do, man. So it's all encompassing when it comes to us understanding that, like, there is no separation in my obedience to parents and obedience to God. It's all together.
I know how she's wired. Like that's her greatest desire and her greatest struggle is that, like most parents, my kids honor and respect me, right? And so when they do that, I can see that the way it causes her to go about and navigate life. Yeah. And when they don't, that's the first thing she will come to me and be like, they're not honoring me. They're not respecting me. You know, that's what you want.
Yeah, big time. How do you feel about that, Tandy, when your kids go the opposite way of what you want?
Well, I don't like it. And especially it's a lot harder as they get older and they decide that they're not going to do that. That's been a challenge and a struggle. But, you know, I love when I do a lot for my kids. I actually, that's all I pretty much think about throughout the day. If they need something, I'm there. If they're calling me from school because they need me to come pick them up because it's a bad day, I'm there. If they forget lunch, or actually that's my responsibility, but then, you know, I'm there. If they forget a paper. So when they get in the car and they give me attitude, I'm going to have a problem with that.
Yeah. Man, that's wow.
So the story tells us that there were 6 jars of ritual cleansing water. So think about that for a second. So there's some depth in that in and of itself. It's not just water in jars. These stone jars had, 180 gallons total, somewhere around there, 150 to 180 gallons total. And it's filled to the brim. So it's letting you know that this miracle can't be second guess. It's not like, oh, they're half filled. They came in and poured some wine in them to fill them to the top. They're already filled to the brim. Letting you know that, like, this is now a true miracle that's about to take place. But John, we'll talk about this in a moment, gets very specific with how he words this. And so this whole thing transpires. The host of the wedding himself, or the father of the bride, is ecstatic. It's the best wine he's ever tasted, and then on top of that, usually you drink the best wine first. You drink the bad wine, the diluted down wine, whatever, because you got to carry this out for 7 days at the end. And he's like, wait, the best wine's coming at the end of the party. And so all this is happening in the celebration. And then John is very clear on how he chooses to write about this. And he says, this is the first of the signs of Jesus. And so he is not taking away from the miracle within the sign, but what he is specifically doing is telling you, as I begin to write my gospel, because this is John chapter 2, my eyewitness account, there are signs that I want you to pay attention to.
That he's the Messiah.
That he's the Messiah, that he is God's son, that he is here in flesh, that he is at work, he is the promise and the blessing, and he has come to do what God promised to do. And there is where we really launched yesterday into the difference between miracles and signs, and being very clear that signs have miracles in them. But when we think about miracles, we only think about the big things, the big miracles that we read about in the scriptures.
Well, I like that. I like that it was even very specific. Like you said, it was filled to the brim, but they were in purification jars, which to me, I don't know if you said anything about this, but to me, like, just even down to the detail of, it wasn't just a vase used for water. It was something that they used to, it just was just so specific. Like those little things are so specific, whether that was meant or if it just happened. But the fact that they were full, it was a very common thing to do ritualistic washing in the first century. So that was common. But I mean, the fact that they were all filled, like it was available. It was there for him to use, but it was done very specifically. Yeah. And, down to the little details of just him making the wine amazing, he does everything with perfection. And I think that's just who Jesus is. Sometimes even down to the little things of like just important to us, but maybe not important to anyone else. He cares about the little details, even when we don't think that he's watching or cares about us. Sometimes he'll just answer in the littlest ways to let us know that he's thinking of us.
Man. Why 6 jars? God created the world in 6 days, right?
We got that symmetry button ready.
Oh my God.
We got the symmetry button ready.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's all over the place.
It's
all over the place.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
It's 6 jars, like you said. Yeah. It's the water is turned into wine. So the very first sign, right, takes you back where? To Moses, right? And the Nile River. This is the new Moses, right? So the very first sign is going to confirm, that's what I'm saying, all these things that Israel has been looking for and waiting for in the Messiah. He is here, he has arrived. So while we see it as water into wine, there's also a broader picture in the symmetry that we have in the scriptures that bring us into this full picture of the never-ending story of God, that Jesus' first miracle or sign isn't by coincidence the very first sign and wonder we find in the Exodus story, right? That's the beauty. Like you said, 6 jars representing 6 days of creation. It happened on the 3rd day, that Jesus arrives and does this miracle. So the light bulbs for all of our listeners and everybody that's involved should be going off, because this is the beauty of the scriptures coming to life in so many ways. But as we said, John calls it a sign. Yes. And yesterday we wanted to be as real as we could and transparent in our own lives about the fact that many people spend most of their life trying to chase the miracle. And in doing so, they miss the sign. And miracles were rare in the scriptures. Signs were more common. Signs have miracles in them. Let's be clear once again. But there are a lot of people that spend their whole life waiting for their Red Sea moment to be parted. And in doing so, they miss the signs and the wonders and the awe of God at work all around them, to point to the fact that Jesus is there, Jesus is listening, Jesus is watching, Jesus is working, Jesus is moving in your life. And John will write about 7 signs in his gospel. Everyone builds upon the next one. And within those signs, as we're saying in the symmetry, it's no coincidence that the very first sign happens at a wedding and a feast, which we know is the end of the story, right? And so there it is again, that symmetry moment of revelation when the groom returns for the bride. He comes back and there's a great wedding banquet, right? Ceremony taking place. And so this is happening in the story, but he's doing it specifically for his followers, his mom, his disciples, and just the servants are the ones allowed to see it, because those who come closest to them are the ones whose eyes are open and ears are able to hear. This is why discipleship is so important. So like you can just kind of pull this apart in so many levels. But when he talks about the 7 signs, it's funny that the 7th one, the 7th one is Lazarus coming back from the dead. So there's symmetry in that, right? The very last sign John writes about is the resurrection of somebody before Jesus himself is crucified and rises from the dead. And then John will end his gospel saying there were many signs, so many so that if I were try to record all them, the books could not contain them. So this is just the truth of God's word. There's many other things that were done. The disciples had to pull away and go, there's specific ones we want you to know about. John chose to use the word signs. We talked about signs in our life because that is really what has propelled us on our adventure with Jesus. And through the highs and the lows are the signs that have come along in our way. And you talked about some of those yesterday.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I mean, I've heard from a few people just in the last 24 hours. I think so many times we get caught up in just the big moment, and we're wanting, like, a lot of us are in a situation where we're just wanting God to fix it, God to take us out of it, God to stop it. And we're missing the signs that are around us. You know, some of us are in relationships. I mean, I'm obviously in a relationship, so I'm not referring to myself, but some of us are in relationships that have just been broken up with, or it's been, you know, some time now, but they're still so caught up on, you know, oh, maybe we shouldn't have broken up, or if this relationship was still going together, or this relationship is ugly and it's not ending, instead of just stepping back and going, well, what are the good things that came out of it? You know, God protected you from a relationship that wasn't healthy. Even if it's two really amazing people together, sometimes it's just not what God is wanting or what is good for each other. And so, you know, just in conversations with our own children who have dealt with breakups and regret and wondering if was really the best thing, it's just like, no, you can't keep looking for the big moment. You sometimes have to step back and go, what is God doing here that's positive? Because we can get so caught up in the negative. And I mean, I'm also responsible for this, but I've been in so many conversations with people who are in big situations and have no ability just to step out. And sometimes I feel like it's my job to, like, oh my goodness, well, this must be my purpose in life. It's to show people how to step out and look at the good side. And sometimes it's overwhelming. And then sometimes I need people to do that for me. But in our life, we've had a lot of, you know, both of us grew up in Christian families. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. I love my town. I love where I grew up. There wasn't a whole lot of exciting things to do. There was a lot of trouble, I'm sure, to get into. But I was taught at a very young age to always, you know, look for God in all the things. And my mom and dad were both very good about pointing us in that direction. If things happened, I mean, there were miracles, or signs, I'm sorry, because miracles happened less than signs, but there were signs all around that just, you know, pointed to God. They were really great about pointing us to God. And I think that was key in how I, you know, lived my life, because when I have a mom and dad who don't have a lot of money growing up and they're pointing out the little things, like do we share the same stories? No. I shared yesterday about a story about my mom when we were younger, and they didn't have a lot of money, and she went to the grocery store to get some food, and they were on a very small budget. And when she got to the store, she wanted to make this shrimp salad for my dad, and she went to get the shrimp and they were out of her budget, and she was, you know, disappointed. And, you know, I'm sure anytime you want to buy something and you can't afford it, that's not exactly the most exciting thing. But she got home, and later on that night, some ladies knocked on the door, and they had cleaned out the food pantry, and they handed her a bag of groceries, and she, of course, was so thankful. And when she was unloading the bag and she got to the bottom, there were 2 cans of the shrimp that she could not afford in the store. And, you know, I remember my mom telling us those little stories, but to me, that was such a sign that God cared about the little things. Like, he didn't have to give her that. He gave her food, and that's all we needed. But the fact that he went down to the very minute detail of knowing who my mom was and knowing what she really wanted and desired, and he provided that. Those are signs, and those are the signs that my mom and dad showed us growing up. We started a church in a small town in Minnesota. We had to move a mile outside of city limits because they kept trying to put so many restrictions. They called us a cult because we had a live band. Like, there were all these like little moments, but that were hard, but there were so many good moments that happened along the way, people's lives being changed. Even to this day, my dad is 72 or 3, and he is the one they call. The people from his town, my parents don't live there anymore. My dad lives in Virginia, and he will still get called back to do funerals and stuff like that. He made an impact. And my mom is the same. She would do the same stuff. She would sing at the nursing homes for the people. She just taught us that, you know, loving God was about the little details and caring for people. And it didn't matter if you were ever going to get noticed, but that, you know, and I think growing up in a family like that, even when it got hard, you know, we were always pointed that God is always working, and he hasn't forgotten us.
That's good, man. We want the big stuff. We want the big miracles. God, I want you to part the sea like you did for Moses. Do that right now. And it's like, and he's responding, I'm doing so much more. You don't even understand. I'm putting the pieces together in your life that I hope you understand this. I hope you align up to where I'm at, because I'm so ahead of you right now. And it's having this broad perspective that so many of us have, rather than the in-depth perspective of the details that God is working through, man. There's a beauty when you fine comb the details and see God. As you guys talk through your story, of getting here to Orlando and beginning Genesis, man, it took me back to some of the stories for me. And, I'll be honest, I like your story with what you had to do with Tandy and getting this church started. Mine is like a mini version of that. Seriously. I as you were saying that, I've heard you say it a few times. It was like a mini version of that. And I don't know if you want to share that today in the pod as kind of another sign from you guys.
Yeah, we can talk about that for a moment, because I think that with her here, it gives you two sides of the conversation, right? And that's the beauty of what God, I think, has done in our life, in our marriage, in our home. It's not perfect. It hasn't been easy. Yeah. The reality, like yesterday, I think was fun, because people just saw the real us, right? Like even in the middle of the message, no, you're supposed to do this part. No, I'm supposed to do that part. This past week was so crazy. There were moments where we would get into this and there were so many other distractions or frustrations. It was causing it in the preparation for Sunday, and we had to go away from each other. So people are like, oh, you're just these perfect Christians that sit down and you get it all together, and it just comes out so right. And like, they don't know the struggle all week when you're trying to get this together as to how the enemy's working as well.
Never tell Tim his notes are blah. If you want,
she did. She told me
Sunday.
this. Now you gotta get the real
being
stuff.
Honest. I said,
she's like, this is blah right now. We gotta
that this is working for me. I don't quite.
Good for
I don't
you,
connect.
Tandy.
Yeah, we'll
That's
tell
great.
him that. He stopped talking
Whoa.
to me for 3 hours.
Don't encourage.
Hold on.
Don't egg on. I see what you're doing right now.
Good for her to find her rhythm.
Yeah.
I'm very like you, Tim. And so I
there is more than one way to do something.
Listen, if I was going to play a song today, you know what song I was going to play?
Please.
Now I get to play it.
Me and Tim
Ready?
everyone that's listening, me and him were fighting for what song to play today.
This is a song we would be playing today.
You. All right, refresh me a
We
little bit.
couldn't be more opposite.
Yeah, but who do most
from
people
each
want
other.
to hang out with?
Paula Abdul nailed it, right?
Who do most people want to
they all want to hang out with you. I've already been told this is going to be the most listened to podcast. Yesterday was the greatest sermon ever given in 14 years at Genesis Church. I know how it all goes. I see it on everybody's faces, right?
I will take it.
But we couldn't. Like when we went to counseling early on in our marriage to our first counselor. We still have a marriage counselor that we go to once a month. We took a test, and when it came back, I was everything down the left side of the page, and she was everything down the right side of the page. When I say like no indentation or tab in, like complete left and right. And the counselor looked at us and said, I've never had two people take this and be as far off the spectrum from each other as you two right now. Yeah. So that's like what we learn about ourselves in the midst of all this, that only God can do this through, right? God, yeah. And so when I think about our story, as you said, and I think about this language of signs, that's why I love it. Some people get too, I'll use the word mystical in signs and wonders. You know, everything is this mystical sign and wonder, and all of a sudden you just sound like you're in some sci-fi movie. But the scripture is very clear. There are spiritual signs of God at work. And when you think of a sign, they keep you going in the right direction.
Yes.
That's the beauty of them. And, you know, I am very, let me be very clear on this. I am very good at directions and getting to places. My wife, not so much. If we were
Tread lightly, my friend.
I'm treading lightly.
It's true. I don't care, but I
If
have
we
more
were
fun
on
getting there.
the what is it, the great race,
No,
the
he won't go on the
the
amazing
great American
race
race, the amazing race.
You'll follow the pathway.
We wouldn't be married anymore. We have decided this.
We'd be the
up
first
front.
ones voted out.
Yes, right.
Or
We'd be
whatever.
arguing. We have to park at Dillard's
Voted out.
at the Florida Mall for 14 years. Because if we don't park at Dillard's at the Florida Mall, she doesn't know how to get out of the mall and where we are, type of a deal.
It's a big mall.
Visual,
Yeah.
right? But I think about this.
Yeah.
It's a sign. I know it sounds dumb. She has to see that sign to know where to go.
Yeah.
This is what John is doing in his gospel. And as you said, I think the beauty is that the first sign is not this public miracle, this grand thing. It is for his mom, first and foremost, his disciples, because that's what they're supposed to do. Come follow him, watch and observe. And then just think about it this way, the servants. Is that not the best word possible for like the other people that need to know that Jesus is at work?
Yeah.
The servants to know, right? So there's that layer in there. And so you have this reality that it's very small for just them. The seventh one, Lazarus will come out of a tomb. Of course, everyone's going to see that and talk about that, right?
Yeah.
So they even build in their grandness.
Yeah.
The beauty is some of these signs are just for you sometimes, for you and your spouse, for you and your home first. And in our story, that's what I wanted to convey, was that there were signs of God at work in our story. I can take it all the way back to us. Truly, she had a list, I had a list of the type of person we wanted to marry. We knew that if God was going to do something and continue something great in our life, who we married was important. We were taught that. Tandy did a great job yesterday of talking about, to recognize signs. They're taught, they're witnessed, they're experienced. And these were taught to us. And, she checked off all the boxes she needed to when she found me.
Oh. No, it is true.
And vice versa. I did honestly with her.
Yeah.
God, I want a woman who loves God, who loves children, who wants to be a mom, who has a heart for ministry. And I saw all this in her early up front. Visible signs in her life. They weren't just the typical, I'm looking for someone, I feel lonely, someone came along, I love this woman, I'm infatuated with her, whatever it is. It was the deep, like, God, I want to know these things are in her. And they were signs that this is the one that I've prepared for you. And that thrust us into a life of ministry as soon as we got married, right out of college, and we were at a church together for almost 9 years doing ministry, trying to raise 2 kids, buy our first home, move away from all of our family and friends. And then God began to do this new work in us. And as I said, I wanted the big miracle moment. God, if you're going to ask us to go start this brand new church in Orlando, Florida, really from scratch, I need a miracle. I need someone to step in. I need someone to come meet with me. I need someone to give me a whole bunch of money. I need a billboard. A true billboard. That's not even metaphorical. I want to drive down the road and read a message on a billboard and know that came from you, God. But my prayer privately that no one really knew was, God, I can't do this if you've not placed it in her heart too.
That's good.
We got to be together on this. We are opposites that attracted together. And so we can't be on 2 sides of the spectrum. She doesn't want to go and I do. Or you're calling me to go, but you haven't told her it's time to go. And there was that night in our life where it wasn't in the greatest of circumstances that we were up against. Not really so much in our home, but in the life of ministry, that she looked at me and she said, it's time for us to go do what God's called you to do. And that night was very pinnacle in our life and in our marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this several times. It can almost get redundant when we talk. Sometimes we talk so much about our ministry life, but it is a big part of us. But we had kind of been hitting the same. It was like recycling through the same things. It would get better, then it would kind of hit us again, and then would it get better. And I just was like, it's finally time. Like it was. I think God has to make us uncomfortable sometimes. And sometimes that's not fun. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it causes, friendship situations and problems with people that you love. But God's going to do whatever it takes if he needs you to move. And for us, I was not wanting to go anywhere. I'd finally found this best friend of all best friends. And I'd waited for that, for years. And my daughter had a best friend and Kobe had we were just set. My life, for me, being a mom, the school was amazing. They just started kindergarten and first grade in an amazing school. I was not ready to go. I did not want to leave. I loved, we just put a basketball court with cement just like 2 weeks before that. We were set. And
we were set with the basketball goal.
Yeah.
Just be clear on that.
Our house had an acre. We had a dog and fenced in backyard. Everything felt great with our family life. But I could tell Tim wasn't happy. And I knew that God was teaching him a lot. And I knew he needed a place to pour that out. And at the moment, the area that we were at was not the place that he was going to be allowed to do that. And I could see him getting frustrated, but I still was so happy. You know, we had a paycheck most of the time. That was one of the things that were happening. But it was just like God had to kind of make it a little bit ugly before I was ready to go, okay, it's time. And once we kind of started committing to that and getting excited, they were exciting. We were moving to the land of Disney World and, palm trees, and I had no idea what the summer heat was going to be like. I regret the summer, but so I knew it was time, and I knew we were being moved. But the biggest thing I could see was that God was working in him, and he had so much to give and share, and there was no platform for that in the capacity that he needed.
Wow.
And we had this moment where I shared that even when God confirmed that first sign, something I've been praying for, God, I need you to speak this and put this in my wife for me to really say yes to this. I doubted it. Like, I still wrestled with, is she just saying yes because she loves me? I was thinking this past week about the differences in the two of us. And I would say that we both have to do.
This week made you think about the differences?
Because it was crazy. We both have to do the aspects I'm talking about, right? But I think what God has shown me that allows us to do it at the level in which we do it at is the fact that I'm called to lead well. Doesn't mean she's not called to lead, but I'm called to lead well. I'm the head of the household. I'm the husband. That's my role biblically that God has put me in. And I have to lead as a pastor of this church. She doesn't, and this is what, God shared with me. She doesn't have to lead well. She leads. She's a good leader. She doesn't have to lead well the way that I am called to do. But what she does that is better than what I do is she loves well, right? And so the fact that I lead well and she loves well is really what allows us to do the ministry and to raise our home in the capacity that in which we do. She did say yesterday, like, this last week was crazy, right? It's another sign that the enemy is at work. We talk about the spiritual signs that Jesus is working in our life, but there's also the reality that you can see the sign of the enemy attacking you, right? And when the enemy is attacking you, it's because you're a threat. Well, I was raised and taught from my home, but also the pastor that I grew up under, that like, if the enemy is not attacking you, you're not a threat. There's a problem, right? And so we've had spiritual attack this week in our lives through all different circumstances, from flat tires to a wash machine flooding out our laundry room, to my daughter's car getting towed, to doctor appointments, to school drama, to friendship drama, to just all these things just in a nutshell, down to, like, I was telling someone the other day, like, you get to the tipping point, right? And it's Saturday, and I'm trying to print out pictures for Sunday. And we go to pick up the pictures, and we didn't pay attention that they're at the wrong address at, like, the CVS. So now you have to go down the road to the next CVS. So now your day's kind of being interrupted. You get there only to find out their machine is broken. So you got to go back home, re-upload them to a new place. Then I go to get some balloons for Sunday and pop the balloons, getting them in my truck. Go home that night to pick up the new pictures, only to realize we put them in at the wrong address and had to drive all the way up past UCF. Like, pictures and balloons were the tipping point of nothing's going right this week. Wow. Right?
See, that kind of stuff doesn't get to me as much, but I think when you're going through so much, because he was having it. Then the traffic's bad and people are driving bad. And I'm like, everybody needs grace. Let's give them grace. Well, he might be waiting because of this. He might be an elderly man. We have to be patient and kind. And he's like, just getting so frustrated, but I'm feeling like I'm having to like calm it down. Those kind of things don't bother me. I think maybe when you take the stress on. But yeah, it was definitely a week. And, it is funny how we both are opposite in how we function. And I think the biggest thing we're learning through that is that there's two ways to get to one point sometimes.
Yeah. And they're all signs. Like I said, she's loving well. She's telling me that person needs grace. That person needs mercy. She said, you asked me to speak this week with you, and we just came off beach baptism. What did you expect from the enemy? Right. So she's loving well, recognizing the signs. And at the same time, I'm being called to lead well and see the signs and know what's happening. And even in some frustration and things like that, all the way up until yesterday where, in the first service, there's just a moment where we're trying to figure out the dynamic of us doing this together. And in that moment, she's like, hey, I need you to take this part. And I realized, though, I didn't lead well in that moment. I tried to get her to do something that wasn't in her wheelhouse. To launch us into it. She did 100%. But the way I set it up for us. And so when we went back off stage, I said, hey, listen, let's adjust that. I'll take that off your plate because that's my job right now. I got to lead through that moment and adapt that.
Hey, I don't think I'm going to go back up on stage. I think you're going to take it.
Well, that was her.
And I'm like, I don't ever want to do this again. Thank you. So
but we're leading and loving together. Yeah. And that's the signs of what God is doing. And so in our own story, when I'm doubting, God, did you really tell her to say yes? Because I don't want to lead her wrong. Is she loving well? There's that moment that I shared that we really never shared in our story, that we had the opportunity to possibly be the church we were at as a South Campus in Florida. Our church is up in Atlanta, Georgia. And that would have taken care of all of our finances. All light fell off the wall by everybody. That's okay. All of our finances, our budget, kept us with insurance, kept us with benefits, just everything that we were giving up to come start this church from scratch. And my pastor, I love him dearly. He's a spiritual father to me. He's a great leader. He came to me and said, listen, if God has birthed something in your heart, don't you dare change it for what I'm about to tell you. But I want to offer this to you. But it was a curveball. God, I need some signs as to which direction I should go in. Should I go in this direction or that direction? Should I follow this path or follow that path? And so in that moment, I come back to her after 3 days of fasting, and she's fasting and praying, and I want to lead well, and I know she's going to love well. And she says, this is what God's given me. We're not saying yes to this because it's going to be easy. We're saying yes to this because we're being obedient to God.
Married to such a wise woman.
I did, didn't I, honey? It's amazing.
You should remember that always.
All those things that you, but you know what? That's the part of it. It's so people need to hear this. Like we're just a normal married couple. Like we just said, we had moments this week. People see it on stage, us just interacting. We go to a counselor. We want the best marriage possible, but we also know life is a struggle and marriage is a struggle. That's why I believe the Bible speaks about perseverance and endurance. Sometimes those are the best aspects of marriage, right? Is that you persevere and you endure through the difficult times. And as one pastor told me, starting a church, as we've done, will be the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So don't make any decisions on either. Don't make decisions when everything's just great and grand, and don't make decisions, especially when they're low and dark. You make decisions in the faithful medium as you're persevering and enduring through, where you'll find wisdom when you come together. And so for us, that's what this passage really did for us, was talk about those signs in our life that point us to the fact that Jesus has been at work. And as she said, there have been moments where we've lost friends. We've had to move away from friends that have hurt us, that have crushed us, in the process. She shared a story yesterday where we laid on the floor together looking up at the ceiling. And one moment in our lives during this church, or during the history of this church, and she said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And it's the only time that I ever rolled over beside her and said, I don't know if I want to either. And yet she was the one that was able to recall that there are signs that God was at work before this moment happened in our life. that really kept us on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, that night was really hard. I think ministry in general is hard. Like I said, we have the greatest church. I don't think there's a better church. I'm sure there's other churches that would argue, but for us, this church is incredible. They love on us. They love our town well. They love our people well. They step in whenever there's a need. We are incredibly blessed. But there are hard moments. I told Tim, one of the reasons I felt like his message was blah earlier is because I think people look at Tim and Tandy and pastor's wife and pastor, and well, it's easy for Tim and Tandy to see signs because they're a pastor and pastor's wife, but we are very normal. We're just like other people. We have to work hard to see the signs. We have to get in God's word. We have to do what it takes. It's not like it just comes easy because we said yes to this ministry. And there are people that hurt us. There are people that, I don't get invited to certain things because of who I am as a pastor's wife. There are people that once they get to know me, it's not quite what they expected a pastor's wife to be. So then there's an issue, which makes me want to step back. I posted something today about, I think it was, it was June last year. I was hurt in ministry and I stepped out completely. I left. I still attended the church. I would joke around that I was going to go to another church for a few months. We'd laugh about it, but, I was hurt. And I didn't want to be involved anymore. And I was just like, every area I get involved in, it hurts sometimes. But I realized in January that I was unhappy. I was unhealthy. I was, just really struggling. And even though I thought that stepping out was going to be what was good for me because I just was over it, I realized that you can't step away from what God's calling you to do. Because when you do that, you're going to be unhappy. So you either stay in the suck of, ministry and the bad parts and just really take the good, or you stay in the suck of life in general. So what I'm realizing is, there's always going to be stupid people that are going to hurt me. There's always going to be sucky moments. But when I step back and I look at the amazing church that we are, I have people calling and checking in on me. I have people who will take me out to dinner and just talk with me, not just take me out. I actually pay for myself, but I have people who, send me flowers sometimes when they just think I'm having a bad day. We have a lady that, stocks us up with meds and stuff to take on missions trips just because she's a caring person. And I'm like, why is it so hard sometimes when we're sitting in the suck or the stupid part of life, to just step back and look at all the other good things? And so when I started to do that and started to really just focus on the amazing things, the signs that God had for me, it looks a lot better. It's a lot better when we can change our focus and look at the signs that God is giving us. And those signs are through the people in our church that are the cool people, the people that really care. And the other people that just want to cause drama and issues, they're not as big. They're not as many. And I need to start looking at that. So I'm back. I'm imperfect. I'm here. This mess of perfection, that's what I called myself today, is here and back. And I don't know what that looks like, but get ready, baby.
Let's go. Tandy's here.
I'll say this at the end. I said it yesterday. The signs that God has put in place to me are the amazing wonders of his working hand in our life. And even in conversations with our children, because they've had to walk this road, right? And I've had my children say it feels like sometimes just people come and go. We get close to people, they leave. We get close to people, they move away. We get close to people, they're no longer here. And they've had to endure this path with us sometimes. And people don't realize what that's like for a pastor's children. They just have expectations of them to be perfect and get it all right all the time as well. But when I look back and I go, man, God, you brought me to Orlando, Florida in the summer of 96. And you gave me a 3-month internship, and I had no clue why. I just came down to hang out at Disney and do summer camp with a bunch of students. That 30 years later, you would have me here leading a church. And I had no idea that when I brought my best friend from my childhood with me down and hooked him up on a blind date one night after church here in Orlando that he would marry the girl that he met down here, and God would move him to Orlando far before I ever arrived. And God, I had no idea that when you would call us to a church to start this church in Orlando, his house would be the one we would live in for 11 months while we're starting a church. We started a church out of someone else's house, not even our own home. Think about that. We were living in a bedroom above his garage. That's it. Starting a church from scratch, and have no idea, because we never talked about it, that 7 years later, he would come join, 8 years later, come join our staff, and we would do this together. And I would have no idea that, in year one, he had a friend who just had been burned, and he said, go check out my buddy's church. And that person on our 1 year anniversary would sit there with his arms crossed, just scowling. You could tell he had been just beat up and burned. And then PJ becomes a pastor here and a lifelong friend. And I had no idea that when we were looking for a worship leader, that Chad would be like, hey, I just literally jogged by a guy's house and sent him a text. His name's Johnny. And I don't know if he is even interested or knows of a guy, but I'm letting you know I sent a text for the position that we're looking through. And I had no idea that he would have this little girl in his youth group, that as he was a youth pastor here in Orlando, that would grow up in his ministry, that would now be a part of our team, producer Alexis over here, and lead us in worship, that the signs of God at work over 30 years going, you're not in control of this, I am. You're not writing the story, I am. It's going to have some really great moments and some really hard moments. It's going to take you to places you've never been and experience things you've never experienced. And there's going to be some really dark valley of the shadow of death moments you're going to feel like you're in. But I'm going to ask you to persevere and endure. And along the way, I'm going to put up as many signs and markers as I can. And they're going to be filled with wonders, big ones and small ones. But if you will pay attention to the signs at work, you will see that I am at work, and I will continue to be faithful as I have been in your life.
Man, that's amazing. When you see the signs, remember, right? Don't be addicted all the time, right? Like you were saying, everything's got to be this mystic thing, and just remember the signs. Remember what he's done. He's working. You'll see his hand move. But remember what he's already done. And that's the beauty of it, man. I don't want to get addicted to always seeing a sign that I don't remember what he did for me last year, yesterday, so it's beautiful, man. I love it because it really brings a real perspective that people can hold on to. Because as you sit in your time in the car here listening or watching, wherever you may be, you can sit down and begin to just think through your life. And I guarantee you there's going to be moments that you're going to stop and say, wow, God was right there. And I'm glad that I could remember that. And it lets me know that there is hope. It lets me know that he's doing something. I stood last week on a trailer, and there's X amount of people, so many people there. And I remember, and the voice of God just rung in my heart deeply. And I heard him say, I don't forget. And I got so emotional. Because, as you said, even my road was a journey to get to this spot.
I think in the end, you're asking if life with Jesus is boring. It's not. It's not always fun. It's a lot of hard sometimes, but the good that you can see from the signs that God is working, that's exciting, that God hasn't forgotten about us, that each one of us individually are important to him, that he who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. From the womb to the tomb, God is there. God is always going to be a part. And so it can be hard, but it's not boring, and it's worth it. It's worth it when you start to put it all together, when you can look at moments like you were saying, and you can look back and go, okay, I didn't like going through this. I never want to go through this again, but I see why you did what you did. That's when you realize, hey, this isn't boring. Life isn't boring with Jesus. It just looks a little bit different maybe than you thought it could be.
Yes, it's always better.
That's great.
Always better. Life with Jesus is better. And this Christian thing is not boring. It's exciting. It's breathtaking. It's life-changing.
Where else can you hear voices of theory? On a podcast.
Right?
Oh. It ain't
Tandy,
boring.
give us some. Yeah.
See? Still there.
It is.
Love
was
it.
never a known song, but it's always been a part of our life since we danced.
It's our song, baby.
We never
That's
had a
awesome.
dance at
I
our
love
wedding, but we got to dance by the pool in front of headlights.
I'm glad I could re-spark that for you guys
I mean,
today.
hey, we danced in the living room last night when Caden asked
Yeah,
us.
because Caden put it on. Now I know
randomly.
why.
Now we know why.
When she was asking what
What
song
are you
is
talking
yours.
about?
And Mom and Dad, what's your
The
song?
Lord spoke to me this morning.
Yeah.
And he told me.
And so then she started playing it. So we just stood up and started dancing in the living room.
If we could have had a choice, it would be Backstreet Boys because that's our.
Yeah, but that was the only cassette that day I had. That's the problem.
We fell in love over the
All
album.
things Backstreet Boys.
Millennium album,
Yep.
number 5.
That's why there's 5 pastors. It's like my own Backstreet Boy.
You're doing so you know what you're doing, huh? Don't tell me who I am in this Backstreet Boy band, please. Please keep it to yourself.
How can you say this is boring? Look how much fun we have.
We have it.
This
So,
is the beauty
man, I
of it.
tell you, the Post Sunday podcast never ceases to surprise us. It is great. It's so good. We are so thankful. We're so thankful to have Tandy with us today, our first female guest.
You need to get Alexis on here.
Oh, she's on. She's on.
She needs more say in this. Break up your little
We started bringing her in. We started bringing her
she-
in.
Did you, last week she was just firing away on stuff.
What do you, Alexis? She's in the house today. What did you take away from all this? Yeah.
To pay attention to the signs, understand them.
Let's go. Yeah.
She's part of the story, baby.
Hunter needs some signs too, doesn't he? Some signs to
Shout out
propose.
Hunter.
There it is.
Let's go.
There it
Shots
is.
fired.
She's like, I'm glad there's.
I'm not gonna tell him about this.
Shots
She's like,
fired.
just listen to this part and then turn it off.
Yes. So good, man.
Awesome.
Well, we are so thankful to have you guys joining us here for episode 19. So thankful for all of you who are listening. Listen, check us out. We are everywhere right now. iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. YouTube is great. We're really putting some time into that. Check us out. Hit the notification button to get notified on every episode that comes up. But subscribe to the channel as well. And listen, we want to hear from you guys. So if there's a question, if there's something that one of the episodes stirred up, we want to hear from you. postsundaypodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. We'll love to get right back to you. Or DM us on Instagram or even on TikTok as well. We're on there at Post Sunday Podcast. So find us, follow us, subscribe. We cannot wait to continue with you guys in the way of the Messiah this year. We'll see you back here next week for episode 20. Grace and peace.